Good afternoon, everybody. I'm forecaster Andrew Fleck for Analyst Weathercast on your Thursday afternoon. Let's talk rain, shall we? Because a front toward the weekend is going to be pulling out of the Midwest and toward the east. There's going to be first a primary low pressure that gives rain to the Ohio Valley once again. Later that weekend into Sunday, a secondary low pressure should form. That secondary is going to bring up Atlantic and Gulf moisture to the mid-Atlantic states. This is going to be a problem for flooding. We're thinking that a general census of 2 to 4 inches is possible. Now, what I do want to deliver is, if we're talking about 2 to 4 inches in the summertime, where the ground is dry, where we have temps in the 80s and 90s, I don't think this would be a problem. But because we're coming off winter, 2 to 3 inches, perhaps 4, is a problem. The ground is yet raw. There's snow cover up north. These are all ingredients to something that is very unwanted when you're talking about inches of rain. And this is not going to be the steady light rain for 18-20 hours, but a very quick hitting, very hard rain. It's going to come through within 6 to 12 hours, and it has the potential to drop that 2+ inches. And when we have the ground as saturated as it is, when we have the snow cover, all of that rain on top of that could cause some jamming and could cause very quick running off into those creeks and rivers. Now let me just show you the general pattern to how this is exactly happening once again. I like to do this just to educate people on how this is setting up. And this is something many runs and many years does normally set up. It's a climate pattern, typical setup, and I'll explain that here. Because generally what you have is a low pressure in these higher colors of green and yellow. In these darker colors, it indicates storminess and moisture. So what happens is you have this high pressure sitting up here off the northeast coast. A high pressure has a clockwise flow. So all this moisture has to find a route around this. So it has to all get suffocated into one area out of the Atlantic and out of the Gulf, and that's into the southeastern states. We do think that this is where the secondary forms and heads north, causing a major rain event for the Mid-Atlantic region. Now let me show you some models here. We're going to give you about 2 of them. Here's the CMC model. This is the Canadian. It does fairly okay, but does have some energy problems here and there. It gets very good though toward the shorter range, so by tomorrow we'll start having a better look at that. But today the CMC is showing between 1.5 to 2 inches of rain across eastern PA, north New Jersey, and south New York. And you know, I think there could be a little more precipitation in there, just given that we do have a big rainstorm coming with a lot of energy, and I don't think the CMC this afternoon is particularly picking up on that. Now, the one model I think that is doing well with this, given the climate in the past, given how much moisture is in this pattern, I think this is the one, the European. The European tends to do very well. It tends to outline as the first runabout than any other model. And as you can see here, it's got about 2.5 to 3 inches of rain across eastern PA, New Jersey, and New York. If we want to be more specific, it'd be falling in that watershed of the Delaware and along the Delaware and the creeks. So that is the model that at least we're going to go with today, because again, it's consistent. You can see the moisture from the Carolinas into Virginia, Maryland, PA, and northward. It's very consistent. We go to the Canadian, and it just seems to be precip just blotted, you know, over Maine, over PA, over Kentucky. But the Euro seems very consistent with its moisture. And with a low pressure, there needs to be a track. There's not much of that on the Canadian, but you can see the evident track on the Euro, and that track is right through here. And that makes much more sense to me. And northwest of that track is where the heaviest rain would be. And of course, that's where you're seeing that 2 to 3 inches of rain. Okay? So now I'm going to explain off a model what exactly needs to happen for this to be avoided, and what eventually could happen if this isn't avoided. Well, firstly, we're going to have the primary low pressure. And that primary low pressure is going to sit over West Virginia And west of it, like I said, northwest is where the heaviest rains are going to be. Northwest is going to get that rain, and that very, very heavy rain. Now, while that's giving the Ohio Valley that good amount of rain, eastward, you start seeing these isobars. They're moving from south to north here. And that's that moisture flow from the Atlantic and Gulf. So the area is getting very, very saturated among the atmosphere with this energy and this moisture. So now when the low pressure eventually comes across into PA, you have double lows, you have a lot more moisture to work with, and that's what eventually happens. And then further on after that, the low pressure then stalls out over New Jersey. So let's give some scenarios. If this low pressure in West Virginia, the primary low pressure, not the secondary that's going to give the Mid-Atlantic some rain, if the primary decides to continue to trending north and no secondary forms, or the secondary takes a while to form, it just delays, well then you could be looking at savored 1 to 1.5 inches of rain over New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York, and there would not be a problem. If this low pressure decides to transfer over to the secondary here, well then a lot more rain is coming for eastern PA, New Jersey, and New York. And given the isobars that are very tight out in the Atlantic here, because of that high pressure I was talking to you about, that could very well stall this low pressure over New Jersey for a bit or a while, and that could cause an extra hour or two of heavy rain. So my guess on this personally is that there is going to be a secondary that forms. I don't think that it's going to delay. I think that the models are going to pick up on it. Sometimes they have trouble with energy, but lately today they've been all doing that. They're picking up on it, and I think that the secondary is going to form. I think that it's going to bring a good amount of rain up to Maryland, New Jersey, eastern PA, especially northeastern PA. New York needs to watch. That could be a jackpot for 3 inches of rain. But all along that Delaware Basin, I really worry that there's going to be 2 to 4 inches falling, and the setup that it's going to be is just some light rain to start, some moderate rain to start, and then going into a heavier rain. There's going to be one very strong band, and this strong band could produce 1 to 2 inches per hour. That's probably going to keep into the area for a good 6 to 8 hours before the storm moves off. So it's going to be very fast falling rain. That causes flash flooding. If the ground was able to condense all that rain, there wouldn't be a problem. But because the ground is saturated, because there's no grass growing, grass isn't grown green or anything, it can't ingest any of that water, the water's just going to lay on top, it's going to flow off the mountains with the snowpack, it becomes a problem. So I hope this was a bit of help for you for Thursday. And by Friday, I think we're going to have probably the best idea. So be sure to come back for more updates. I'm forecaster Andrew Fleck for Analyst Weathercast.